Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Nitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. This is Trace Mayer. Just some quick housekeeping before we get into this first interview. I'm rebranding the runtogold.com podcast. It's going to be the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We got a domain for it, bitcoin.can. Would love for everybody to share that with their friends. What I want to accomplish from this podcast is I want to have interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. I want it to be very objective. I want it to be very much something that you can forward to anyone who wants to really start learning about Bitcoin, whether they're new, whether they've been in it for a while. I want it something for everybody. And I want it to be a trusted source for investment professionals, lawyers, accountants, bankers, regulators, lawmakers. I want to be very objective. I want to, just present everything just how it is. No real agenda in that sense. Not going to be recommending services for the most part, even though I'm invested in some. I just want it to be a great forum for people to learn a lot of that type of stuff. So with that, we're going to start into our first interview. And so we'll start there.
Bravo Tango Charlie Kilo, episode 100. This is your host, Trace Mayer, and we have with us Andy O5. He's a senior developer with Armory Technologies that develops the Bitcoin Armory wallet. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thanks, Trace. Good to talk to you.
Yeah. So our topic for this podcast is going to be all about wallets. And this is 101. We're just starting off with the real basics. So, what is a Bitcoin wallet? How does it work?
Well, a Bitcoin wallet is how you organize and protect your Bitcoin keys. That's your public key and your private key. And for those unfamiliar with Bitcoin, the keys are essentially the key to spending and receiving Bitcoins. When somebody sends you a Bitcoin, they send it to your public key. So everybody knows your public key, and hopefully only you know your private key. So there's a one-to-one relationship between public and private keys. And one of the effects of Bitcoin is now there is data in the world that is worth money directly. In the past, a hacker would have to take over your computer and do something with it to make money, maybe access your other financial data and take advantage of that in some way. But with Bitcoin, it's now a one-step process. Access your private key, take your money. So it actually has increased the amount of potential for hacking computers, and has also caused a great deal of increase in the technology available to protect your data. And one of the manifestations of that is a Bitcoin Armory. And we are working on many different features, and have already quite a few features that are designed specifically to protect your private keys for your Bitcoins that you own.
Yeah, so I like how you get right into where the rubber meets the road. It's all about the private key, right? And you have to respect the keys. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to hold those keys, or somebody's, whether it's Coinbase or Circle or a bank or you as an individual. Somebody's going to hold that private key. Now, when we say private key, that's really just kind of a string of numbers, right?
Well, it really is a number. It's a very large number. When we're talking about private keys, keep in mind, is just a big number. In technical terms, it's a 32-byte number. And well, how big is 32 bytes? 32 bytes is enough to assign a number to every atom in the universe. That's about how big 32 bytes is. So if you want to visualize what it means to have a private key, you can think of it as, I'm thinking of an atom in the universe. Can you guess the atom that I'm thinking of? And being able to guess that would be really hard. And so that's the security behind at the very base level is having a number large enough to enumerate every atom in the universe and keeping that a secret.
And when we're talking about just guessing one of those at random, like that's pretty much impossible given the current laws of mathematics and the current laws of computer science and thermodynamics, etc. Like you can't just guess this number, this private key, right?
Right, you can't, because that's another thing people concern themselves with is what if I have the same private key as somebody else? And really, that's equivalent to saying, well, what if I have thought of the same particular atom in the universe that somebody else thought of? You could try all your life and never have a collision of two atoms in the universe.
But okay, so we're gonna get back to this, like how those numbers are generated, because we could get a quote unquote collision, and a collision is where two people have come up with the same number, right?
Yeah, but that can't happen because of the size.
Well, it could happen if, well, we'll get to it a little bit later, but it could happen if somebody chose to focus on the same atom, for example.
Oh, well, yes. If you use some sort of, if you have poor entropy, yes, then that could definitely happen. And then that's the key behind entropy. While you do have the numbers involved in your private key are large enough, right, to enumerate every atom in the universe, is your method of generating that number going to expand that space? I mean, is it going to expand to fill that space? So if you say pick a random number, well, certainly somebody else could use the same method that you used to pick the random number and say do it as many times to get all the possible random numbers there are, and then they can put that in a database and try them all. And they'll have a collision with you if you did the same thing they did.
So let's take an example of this. There's a site called brainwallet.org, and you can actually download the source code and run it on your own computer, so that's good. But what BrainWallet really kind of touts is that you can create one of these passphrases, and that gets converted into a private key. And so it's very easy to remember. For example, we could use the word cat, C-A-T, and that would actually generate a specific number, right? Like a specific private key.
Yeah. Well, imagine if you went about, say, get a bunch of people that you know, right, who want to work for minimum wage, and just put them on that website and have them generate bunches and bunches of brain wallets. And then you store each one in a database. And then after you do that, maybe with a few dozen people, and they spend, say, a week doing that, you might have a couple of 100,000 brain wallets in your database. And now you've got a couple of 100,000 lottery tickets. And you keep checking those against blockchain.info to see if any of these brain wallets have a balance, because one of your worker bees might have chosen the same brain wallet as somebody else. And if they did, you get their Bitcoins.
Okay, so like before we were talking about this before the show, and you had an analogy that like stealing Bitcoins is kind of like playing the game Capture the Flag. And so the flag is the private key. But now it appears that we've got two different ways, that like two primarily different ways that we can steal that flag. We can steal that flag with a physical attack. That's where somebody might like compromise your computer, right? And like steal your computer, or steal your iPhone and be able to get the private keys that way. But there could also be a purely mental attack vector, right? And that's where somebody's able to steal your Bitcoins because of this entropy attack.
Well, right. So that entropy attack basically means I'm going to steal anybody's Bitcoins who might want to use the same method of generating their private key that I'm going to try.
Yeah. So, and let's give an example of this. So I was reading the Armory forums on Bitcoin Talk, and somebody had suggested to include this brain wallet feature into Armory. This specific brain wallet feature, and he provided his own software code. Of course, it was open source, like we could read it and everything. But the first thing I thought of was, I wonder if this is an attack vector on the entropy. Because if he can convince people to generate their Armory wallets using these using bad entropy, then there could be a potential attack vector there. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about how we spotted that and didn't include it in Armory, how it could have been a potential risk, and how we actually do generate entropy in the Bitcoin Armory wallet.
Well, first of all, anyone can create their own brain wallet in Armory. We just don't expose it in the user interface. Basically, people are free to do whatever they want with open source code, and they can very easily find the correct function call to generate a brain wallet and use it on a command line and do it that way. But we trust anyone that's savvy enough to do that is also savvy enough to understand the risks and to do it correctly. For instance, I use that same feature to generate my private key, but I didn't come up with a bunch of words. Instead, I took a deck of cards and I went through the first 40 cards in the deck, and I just wrote down the initials of the name of the card. King of Clubs would be KC. And so I go through 40 cards, and I've got about 80 characters. I enter that on the command line, and I generate my private key. That has plenty of entropy to cover the entire space of atoms in the universe. So that's a decent technique. Coming up with some words, not so good, because somebody else might come up with the same words and steal your Bitcoin. And those people are out there, and they're trying to do exactly that. So we hide that feature. And this gentleman came along, and he wanted to expose it. He wanted people to know about the beauties of the brain wallet. And you very cleverly spotted that. I bet he wants to run that attack on people that use that feature. And so really, we discourage that by hiding it from the user interface. And also, anytime you've heard the founder of Armory talk, Alan Reiner, if he's talking about private keys and entropy, he's going to warn whoever he's talking to about the dangers of brain wallets and the importance of entropy.
And so how do we, so for a new user to Armory that is running it in the standard mode, so they're not even in advanced or expert, how is Armory generating the entropy for them? And how do we know that that's safe? Well, that Armory is not going to steal their flag?
Well, one way you know it's safe is you can look at the source code. But I understand that for most people, looking at the source code is not an option. There's experts out there who have looked at the source code, and they're independent, and they have made comments. And if you read up on forums or go to the GitHub where the source code is stored, you can read other people's comments and read enough to trust it. We use the computer randomizer on the computers that the software runs. But we also go through and do the research to make sure that the random numbers generated on the various platforms that Armory runs on provides enough entropy. And then we also add a couple of extra layers just in case. So I won't go into the details of it, but even if a particular platform has poor entropy, then just in case, we compensate that for adding a couple extra layers on top of that.
And so that's a protection against this potentially only mental attack. And in a lot of cases, people don't have any idea how the wallet software is generating the entropy, or whether the developer even took very good precautions to make sure that the entropy is being generated in this completely random type of way.
Yeah. Well, about a year ago, I think it was sometime last year, there was a well-known weakness in a particular Android phone, and there was an attack against that weakness, wherein the attacker used the particular phone to generate millions of Bitcoin private keys, put them in the database, and then tried all those private keys, and he was able to steal Bitcoins from quite a number of Android users who had used the particular kind of phone, to generate their private key, because that phone did not have enough entropy. That was a successful attack. This attacker's database of private keys matched some Android users' private keys, and those users lost their Bitcoins. And that's what happens when you have poor entropy.
Man, that's a scary prospect, isn't it? Like, not only could a wallet developer just be negligent or just kind of not fully understand the ramifications of the cryptography and the math, but a really clever wallet developer could actually be malicious and release a really cool wallet out there that's got features, etc. But there could be a small little way for them to attack all those private keys through the entropy, for example. And
right.
And so it's very important for people to keep their Bitcoins in a very safe, trusted, peer-reviewed, open-sourced wallet.
Right. So here's the thing. That feature that we don't want to expose to people because they might misuse it, that feature is actually the key to making the most secure wallet. Now, certainly, you run our wallet on any decent computer that we support, then you're fine. But if you really want to prove it to yourself that Bitcoin Armory is not out to steal your Bitcoins, because maybe you don't even trust us, the way to do it is what I did, which is to generate your own entropy. You can use a deck of cards. You can roll dice. And if you're really careful, you're going to do the math yourself and figure out how many dice rolls or how many cards you have to draw to generate enough entropy so nobody's going to have the same private key as you.
Now, this is really kind of fun. I actually I remember when a friend of mine, he had just learned about Bitcoin, and he was at our meetup group, and this was the first time I met him, and he was like, I generate my private keys offline with dice. And he's like, I really wish there was a program that did that. And I was like, well, haven't you heard of Armory? And he was like, well, no, like, what's it do? So I told him about Armory, and this was even after I had funded Armory. And the next time I saw him, sure enough, he had written a Python script where he could input his own dice rolls as the entropy. And, fast forward a little bit, and he's actually a developer now over with the Airbits wallet, the mobile wallet for iOS. And he's also contributed some to the Bitcoin Core. But I think it's very, very helpful for people to know that, we with Armory, it has been that the feature has been abstracted away so that the new user doesn't have to kind of deal with this much more technical part. But if people want to, they can dig in and generate their own entropy and make sure that their Bitcoins are absolutely safe from that particular attack vector, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we just, I just hit on another topic, which is this difference between cold storage and hot storage. But I don't want to get into that in this episode. I just want people to be aware of those terms. We also have another term called coin control, and this has to do with like the exact Bitcoins that you're sending in a transaction, because some of the wallets really kind of jumble that, which can be an attack on your privacy, for example. So we're going to talk about that in a later podcast too. But like, I wanted to wrap up this particular podcast by just getting into just scratching the surface on a couple security implications. One, like, what is network security? And two, what is wallet security? And can you talk a little bit about how Bitcoin Core, or the Bitcoin QT client, focuses on that network security while the Armory wallet focuses on the wallet security?
Well, as far as the network security, I guess what we're talking about is your ability to access the blockchain. How secure is your access to the blockchain? And we rely on Bitcoin Core for that. So when you use Armory, you're actually accessing the blockchain through Bitcoin Core. So we get to take advantage of the Bitcoin Core security features, and something that we don't have to deal with, because that happens through software that already exists. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. What Armory has innovated in is securing your wallet, securing your access to your keys. So we let Bitcoin Core secure access to the blockchain information, and Bitcoin Armory secures your access to your private keys.
So a good way to kind of analogize this would be capture the flag. Your flag, that's the private key. That's the secret that you don't want anybody to know.
Right.
But then the blockchain, that is completely public. And so everybody's got access to that. But it's still important for you to make sure that you've got a correct copy of the blockchain, a blockchain that the distributed network has come to consensus on, because there could be potential attack vectors there also, right?
Right. So one of the ways in which people have lost their Bitcoins is they've been tricked into sending Bitcoins to the wrong address. So it's that's where the network security comes into play. So rather than trying to steal your private keys, these attackers will feed you bad information about who's got what address, and they'll try to substitute their address for somebody that you are legitimately trying to pay. And that's what attacking your network security can do for you. It's basically a man-in-the-middle attack that prevents you from getting accurate information about the state of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, and we're probably gonna have to have another podcast with probably Jeff Garzik over at BitPay, where we talk a little bit more about all this network security aspects. So there we go. I think we've got a good overview of what wallets are. We've got public keys, we've got private keys. We understand that private keys are just a number. And that's a number that we have to keep secret, right? When we generate that private key, we have this concept of entropy, which is the randomness that we generate that with. Then we have coin control, so we need to be able to control which particular Bitcoins we're sending around. We'll talk about that later. Then cold storage versus hot storage. Because we can run Armory and generate all of these private keys. We can do that on a computer that we build with software that we download and verify, but on a computer that's never touched the internet, right?
That's correct.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really big deal because it really makes the attack surface a lot smaller. And then we got these security implications with the network security and the wallet security. So there we go. There's an overview about wallets, the really important part of the wallet, which is the private key, and that's where our Bitcoins are at. And at the end of the day, somebody has to hold those private keys. And what Armory does is it makes holding and generating and securing those private keys hopefully as easy as possible and as safe as possible. So there we go. That's episode 100. And thank you very much, Andy, for being on the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, a senior developer at Armory Technologies, which is developing the Bitcoin Armory wallet. And we're going to be right back on with another episode going a little bit more in depth into some of these areas. So thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Trace.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.